Welcome to the Sober Social Podcast, a show dedicated to helping individuals in recovery. For this season, we'll be bringing you individuals who helped me through my recovery journey. They played a vital role for me. Through this season, we'll bring you inspiring stories, expert advice, and helpful tips on addiction and recovery. Whether you're in recovery yourself or you know somebody who is, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. All right. So welcome to the very first episode of our show, the Sober Social Podcast. Today, our very first guest on the show is my mom. So, Mom, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Azamba, and I'm Wilson's mom.
Awesome. Okay, very good. So, there's a lot of things we want to explore today, Mom. But very firstly, there's a burning question that I have to ask. I think my two siblings they need to know this. Everybody in the world needs to know the answer to this question. So, am I your favorite child or what? You know what? Don't answer it. Based on that laugh, you know what? I know I am. So just
I would say mother's love is equal.
the
No
the
favorites.
political response.
Yeah, however, you focus probably more on whoever has the utmost need at that particular time. And so, yeah, and as a mother, you're always protective, sort of towards, the one you feel that is weakest. For love, it's equal.
I see.
Okay.
How about okay, so for love it's equal.
Uh-huh.
That's great. So how
Yeah.
about the favorite one though?
Oh, I have no favorite ones.
Another political answer. I feel like Mom, we'll
No
explore this a little
favorite
later,
ones.
off camera.
Okay.
I know for sure. Mom, how did you grow up?
I grew up in Nigeria. I was born in a little town called Bori in 1970. And my mother will always recount, the story of my birth. And she will always tell me, something like, she was sick before my birth. She said, so there was so much fluid coming out that they were not even sure that the child would survive. But I did. And she'll always tell me that my birth was the most painful that she had. And she had a lot of challenges afterwards. And so she called me Dumali, which means hope. And she'll always say, if there's life, there's hope. And she will pray that God will keep me alive and keep her alive. And so she says this to me all the time. Even like 3 weeks ago, she said the same thing, to me, that she had prayed a prayer. God answered it. And
Okay.
today she has hope.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool story. I've never heard that one before. So
Okay.
so you were born in Bori and then you moved.
Yes. And so my father used to work for the Department of Agriculture. He had gone to school in, I think it's called the School of Agric
Okay.
Umudike around the Umuahia area.
Okay. All these places, my mom growing up in Nigeria, all these places are parts in Nigeria.
So and then he met my mom. I think it was kind of like an arranged marriage.
But those were very common back in the day.
Yes,
in
they
Nigeria
were
especially.
very common back in the day. And so my father worked for the Department of Agriculture. And I do remember, growing up, also that my father had a lot of poultries. And probably that, made me hate chickens. For a long time, I didn't eat chicken. Growing up, I would see them and how the smell of the poultry and all of that. And I look at the skin after, the feathers are plucked. And I tell my mom that the chicken had goosebumps. And so that scared me. And I never did eat chicken for a long time. It was,
I didn't
I
know that.
began to eat chicken, you know, As a young adult, I was really picky, with my food.
Mm.
And so I grew up actually. We moved from Bori and we moved to Port Harcourt. And I grew up in Port Harcourt, had my primary school education in Oregon Primary School in D Line. We lived in a place called D Line 52 Ibuku. That was where I grew up actually. And then I went to Federal Government College in Douani and went to UST, River State University of Science and Technology.
Mm. Very
And
good. That's really cool. Okay. So, I mean, we're going to skip fast forward to then like me being born.
yeah,
So, when did you find out that you were even pregnant with me first and foremost?
I had your sister Stephanie, and you have 1 year and 6 months or 7 months. I can't remember
Yeah, something
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so between both of you, shortly after I gave birth to Stephanie, Stephanie was still a baby. She had not started talking when I realized that I was pregnant with you. I had Stephanie through cesarean process. So, but you came along so fast. And so I knew I was going to have you through cesarean. It was also during the Abiola crisis in Nigeria that you were born, just before then, because I still had my incisions,
Mm.
wound, the sutures, when I left the hospital, and I knew that there was so much that was going on in Nigeria
Okay,
at
here.
that
So,
time.
rewind a little bit. So, the Abiola crisis, just give us like a 30-second recap. What exactly is that?
Yes. This was the period that Chief MKO Abiola, ran for presidency and going to jail and so much with I believe, with the Abacha regime and all of that. And there was so much, just going on. Nigeria was in a lot of chaos.
So,
There
like,
was the strike action included just all the labor forces,
I see.
labor organizations in Nigeria. So it was like a shutdown of everything, at that time.
I see.
So,
Okay. And then, so you have me around that time when all
yeah,
that's going on.
yeah.
And then, what was it like?
Things were really tough in Nigeria at that time because I believe there was also a curfew. People were not allowed to go about. It was like so much restriction, in Nigeria. And just like I said, a lot of chaos. And I remember coming home and, my incisions became infected because, I couldn't like go back and forth. There was no petroleum, what we call gas in the United
Hmm.
States. It was really challenging to
So,
get
medical
that.
services were challenging then.
Yes. So my incision got infected. And I do remember my mom had a doctor friend, the doctor, the physician, and the wife, came home and took a look at the incision and told me what to do with it because it was hard, to get out and to get any money at that time, and to get to a hospital, to visit, even with, get across town to where I had, my surgery and all of that. So, but long story short, at the end of the day, the incision healed, and so yeah, so but that was how it went.
Very good. So, what was it like being my mom, like from a young age?
Being a mother was challenging, but the culture that I also grew up in kind of like prepared me to be a mother. And I think that, for a lot of women, for me, it came natural. At some point, as a woman, you're expected, to have children, especially after marriage. That was my culture, the culture I grew up in. And back home, in the day, you're taught as a girl, to take care of the house, you learn to cook, you take care of the day-to-day daily activities, especially when my mom was not there, bathing my younger ones and cleaning the house. So It just came natural,
Mm.
to me, very natural.
All your children have like different personalities.
That's right.
Okay, so what was my personality like, and when was the first time you saw it?
I remember, as a little child, you walked so fast. By the time you were 11 months, you were talking. I did remember, the first time it was like you were humming a song, under your breath. And I kept on wondering, I was asking myself, is this child talking? Is he singing? And then, I remember my sister Lelo was a Uniport. We had gone to Uniport to see, her. And then I was driving back and I could hear big car. I was like, did he really say that? Big car. And so observed that each time an 18 wheeler will go by us, you will yell, big car. I was totally blown away. Yeah, because your sister did not talk, quickly. She did not walk quickly. By the time you were 11 months, you were going up and down.
Hmm.
We are walking out around the house. So, yeah.
That's really, really interesting because I do like cars a lot now. I
Yeah.
do. And like it's one of those things where like I've had to like, they say like, you have to control your self-control is important. And growing up, you always used to say something that I never ever forget. You would say a man without self-control is
It's
like a
like a
city
city
without
without
walls. And I never ever forgot that.
That's
That's something that I never
right.
really forgot.
That's
And so
right.
even with cars, I like them a lot and I always want to buy them. I guess I'm surprised, but then at the same time, not surprised to hear that big cars really fascinated me. But tell me more about that. So even growing up past that age, like, getting to maybe like around like 5 or 6, I started to become really mischievous.
Yes, you were very smart. You will you will say things, but you were serious minded. You've always been serious minded. And so, yeah, but there was something about you. I noticed the hand of God was upon your life. And I remember the first time you told me that you had a dream. You were like 6. I was wondering, do children dream? Do they have dreams? And I asked you if you wanted to share the dream, and then you say no, and then you go away, and then you will come back. You tell me you had a dream, and I ask you, do you want to share? You go no, and then you went back. It was a whole day. You were doing that the whole day, and then finally at about, 6 p.m., I remember I was in the kitchen and you came in and I asked you, do you want to share your dream? You told me again that you had a dream. I said, I know. It was like, this had been going on the whole day. I asked you if you wanted to share the dream. And you said yes. And you shared an identical dream that I had at night. And I almost fell of the chair I was sitting. I was like, does God talk to little people? I was so stunned.
So it was an identical dream. You had the same dream,
yes,
and I had the same dream as well.
yes, word for word.
Do you remember what this dream was?
I don't exactly remember, but I just know because it's been a long time
Right.
that it was an identical dream. And so I took you to my mom and I was like, do you know he had an identical dream? So, but on knowing a little bit about spiritual things at that time, I understood that God was talking, probably talking to you and, talking, communicating with you because I
It still
knew,
does. It still does.
that I had a gift of, revelation. And so, for you to see exactly what I was saying. So that was really, amazing.
Yeah.
And I did remember, my pastor telling me that, oh, he had told me before that the hand of God is mighty upon your life. Then came other revelations, even when I would pray and, and I would, just finish praying, get up, and not sit down and listen. I just talk to the Lord, talk, 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 and get up and go away. I remember you calling me one night when I was praying, and you said to me, "Take it, Mom, take it." And I said to you, I said, in the morning when you woke up, I was still praying. I paused and I looked at you, and your eyes were closed, but you were telling me to take something. And I was wondering what you were asking me to take. So in the morning, as I was getting you ready to go to school, you were in elementary school. I asked you, I think you were in like primary one, and I asked you, do you remember last night you were saying I should take it? And then you paused and you kind of had a look on your face. I'll never forget. And then you said to me, yes. And then I asked you, what did you see? What were you asking me to take? And then little you told me that there was a man in a white robe that was standing by the bed of Samuel. Samuel's bed was in the same room. And
Samuel's my little brother. Sam's.
yeah. And so, but dad, he was giving me something. And I said, do you know what it is? You said, yeah, it was a key. But that I was not seeing it. I was shocked. I said, really? He said, yeah. But you were not seeing the key. I paused over this. The entire day I pondered. I was like, Lord, what were you giving me that I was not seeing? And so I went to my pastor, and as I was chatting with my pastor about it, he said, yeah. He said, because when you pray, he said, you have instant response, from the Lord for your prayers. However, you do not sit long enough in his presence, to hear him talk to you. And so you were calling that, he was calling my attention, using you to call my attention to the response to this prayer. And so, I went back, and then he told me, he said, when you pray, just sit in the presence of the Lord. Don't go away. The Lord will speak to you. And I remember one of the first times I knew that the Lord was speaking to me. I was reading the Bible, and I began to have, interpretations to these words, like between the lines. I don't know how to describe it. Just knowing things that happen that it was just not natural to know. And I could hear, the voice, talking to me in phrases and terms I don't usually use. I was like, wow, the Lord is talking to me.
Wow.
And so, the Lord used you to also reach out.
Wow.
And another one that was quite remarkable, was one afternoon we were sitting down, and, you had several revelations at that time, but there were a couple that stood out to me. We were, sitting at a table, and then the Bible talks about Ezekiel, when he talked about, being elevated and seeing one leg in
Right.
Jerusalem and one leg somewhere else. I can't remember right now. But you told me that you had seen yourself, because you would stare into like a place, like, and I asked you, I said to you, I said, did you see anything you want to share? And you said, yeah. I said, what did you see? You just told me that you saw yourself elevated, like staring into the earth. I was so stunned. And the phrases you used to use used to baffle me, because I just knew that you were so little. I was like, little people don't talk like this. Little people don't see this kind of stuff. And so I knew that the hand of God was mighty upon your life.
That's really
So,
awesome. That's really great. Like, these
at
are
that
really, really
time.
great stories and great instances. And like, I think like God's hand upon my life, and I felt God throughout my life every step of the way. And one thing I always wondered was, if God's hand is upon my life, then the real big crux of the matter, right? Like for most of my life was, then how did I become an addict? And like, why did I struggle so much? Like, why did I have so many struggles? Now, most of those questions have been answered. Like at this point in my life, I understand why. And even being here, having this conversation with you is part of the why. I used to wonder so much. Like, there's people out there I know that'll probably be listening to this and have listened to it. And they're at that point in their lives where they're probably wondering, they're like, okay, you know what? I know there's something about me because in my addiction, like I remember sitting and knowing there is something about you, man. Like this is not where you're supposed to be. But why are you here? Why am I here? Why is it taking so long? We'll explore that in a second. But before we do, so I used to be troublesome. I used to be mischievous growing up. Tell me about like maybe how you handle that. What was that like for you as my mom? Like growing up, people complaining quite a bit.
Yeah, you were mischievous, but you were a good child, and you and your siblings were my prayer partners.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, even in that, because the Bible says foolishness abounds in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction drives it away. And that rod of correction is actually, for me, is, instructing a child, directing a child, praying, that a child, life will align with the will of God for that child. And, also, back home, we spank our children also,
I
and
got spanked
also,
growing up.
yeah, disciplinary measures, and also talking with, you, asking you questions like, why did you push down grandma's television?
Oh, that was a great story. So I got to tell that one, and I remember that story really well because so my grandma had a TV that she had brought from her house, and it was basically being stored in our house very temporarily, and it was on a stool. The TV was managing the balance on that stool. Like if you turned it on, like because back in the day those big TVs to turn it on, it wasn't a remote control or a button. You had to push the thing in, and so I was explicitly told not to touch the TV. I remember explicitly being told not to touch the TV. Within, I don't know, 2 minutes of them walking away, guess what I do? I get up, walk right up to that TV, man, plug it in, and then push the TV button. As soon as I push the TV button, the TV loses balance, comes crashing down, and absolutely just gets decimated.
Yeah. I remember hearing the explosion and I knew it was you right away. And even at that time, every mother knows what child is capable of what. And so I knew that he had to be having you. When it exploded, you were scared. And so,
I
yeah.
was. I remember being very concerned.
Yeah, so, but that's just part of it. What about when you shaved Samuel's eyebrow?
Okay, another story.
Yeah, and I
Well, okay,
remember,
well, me and Coco did that. So that was me and my sister. We both shaved my little brother's eyebrow together.
yeah, and so I remember coming back and looking at Samuel's eyebrow, and half of it was gone. I just couldn't believe my eyes. I was like, what happened here? It's part of growing up and, going to my sister's purse, and breaking her lipstick and,
That was a fan favorite. I don't know why I
yeah.
did that, but I would just go, like I used to actually eat it. I would bite it and like eat, like, because the lip gloss tasted so good.
Yeah, and have your face covered in it. And so, I mean, and so, but all of those were just, part of growing up, and children are curious. I went to explore things, but as a parent, you always guide and nurture and try to, get into their heads
Yeah,
also and ask questions. Why did you do this?
yeah,
And yeah, you'll be amazed at what
yeah.
children will say.
So, mom, okay, so fast forward then from there, I went to a boarding house with my sibling, my
Oh,
sister.
yeah.
Why did you send us to a boarding house
Because in
versus a day
Nigeria,
school? Because some kids went to day school, some kids went to boarding house. I know boarding houses were more prevalent in Nigeria, but why did you make that decision?
Yeah, because it was a good school. I
Great
went to a
school.
boarding school myself. I have to go to school in Ondo State, outside, of River State. I'm from River State, and I went to school in Ondo
So
State.
how old were you when you went to?
I went to Idoani when I was 9 plus.
Okay, so you were 9 years old,
Yes.
and grandma put you in a car with her,
Yeah.
and she drove you.
No, she did not drive. My dad, we had like a driver.
Okay.
Yeah, in Nigeria, and so
So they shipped you both
Yeah.
you at 9 or 10? 9
9 plus, and I
to a
had
boarding
neighbors.
house.
Yeah, my neighbor actually.
How far was the boarding house from where you lived?
Oh wow, that was like
So
7 or 8 hours or 9 hours
drive.
journey.
Okay, so
Yeah.
basically you lived in Arizona and then you went to boarding house in Alabama or something like that.
Yeah, kind of. No, Alabama is too far.
It's too far. Like Texas.
No, like California,
Or like California.
San Diego area, or farther.
Or farther.
Yeah.
So Seattle.
Maybe.
Okay.
Or I wouldn't say San Francisco because it's a 12 hours drive to
yeah.
San Francisco. In Nigeria in those days, the roads were not very good.
Good. Wow.
So
okay.
that also created a lot of delay. But, my parents, will arrive home probably, or whoever it was, because at the time we started carpooling, when we'll go to school.
Okay.
All the kids, that went to that school from, that we knew from River State, would just get a vehicle and we'll all go. And so, but it would take it was a whole day's journey.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a whole day's journey. You guys would drive. You would drive all the way there to school, 12 hours away. Did that influence you in sending us to a boarding house also?
No, but it was just the norm in Nigeria.
It was a norm. So like 80% of kids went to boarding houses.
Yeah.
And they went at 9 or 10 years old.
Yes.
I see.
Yes, because our school system is kind of different.
Very, yes.
Yes. And so in those days in Nigeria, when I grew up, we had class 1 to class 5, and then they came out with the
grades or JSS
and the SSS system. So
and JSS stands for Junior Secondary School.
Yeah.
And SS stands for Senior Secondary School.
Schools. My set in Idowani was the last set that had
class 1 through 5.
Class 1 through 5.
I see.
So yeah, so it was just part,
it was just the norm.
It was just the
so norm. It wasn't necessarily because you were like, oh man.
No.
Because my sister Stephanie was a really good kid.
Yeah.
Like growing up, I looked up to her. She was like the good one.
Yeah.
She could not almost never got spanked. Basically, she was really quiet, shy. When we were younger, between 0 and 5, I used to be able to convince her to get into mischief with me. But I think as we got older, she just was like, dude, you're on your own.
Yeah, okay. She was very quiet, but she's also very smart.
Absolutely, yeah. Unequivocally, without a doubt. And very brilliant.
I used to tell her, no, you're the older, and you need to tell your brother, no. Yeah, don't get into mischief with him. Don't do that. And then, there were times when I really get upset because it would be like, who did this? And then Wilson will point at the sister, and the sister will cry and say, no, it's not me, he did it. And I knew he was Wilson. And then she will not be able to speak up for herself. And that used to make me really upset. And I would go, look, your brother is going to sell you off one day. You didn't speak up. I know he did it because I could tell, who was the curious one, in the house. And so, yeah.
Okay, so when you say curious, inquisitive, I grew up very curious about things.
Yes.
I was always very curious.
Yes, you wanted to inspect things. You wanted to see things. Yeah.
I always wanted to know.
You wanted to know. And
see what was going on.
Yes. So I believe that may also have contributed to the addiction problem you had. Because, coming into this country, we had heard stories back from Nigeria, how children get here and they get into vices and all of that.
I was just about to go there. So, what
Yeah.
was the big deciding factor? Because I know Dad didn't want us to come here at all for a while.
Yes.
So, because we would come and visit and go back, come and visit and go back. So, eventually, a lot of things happened, a lot of things changed, and then you basically were one of the driving factors in us coming here. And so, when we got here, like, what was life like? What do you think? Do you think the culture affected me
I
a bit?
think that the culture, because I first of all, I began to observe the kind of friends you kept. And being older, I kind of thought something was wrong, with your friends or the kind of friends you kept. And so, because these friends, when I talked with them, when I spoke with them, their responses, to my questions, did not align with my values or our values.
Mm.
And that made me worry. And so I began to ask you why you were keeping these friends because children, easily influenced, by their peers. And, children really, especially teenagers, they want to belong. They don't want to be a lot of times they don't want to be the odd man out. And so if one is doing something that is bad, it takes a lot of courage, for any one of them to stand up to their peer to say, you know what, I'm not going to do that. And so, comes the adage, show me your friend and I'll tell you who you are.
So basically, just by the friends I had at that point, you could see that something was starting to go downhill.
Yes.
Really?
And then, for some reason, I don't know if this was spiritual because I began to smell, like you would walk past me and I could smell,
Yeah.
even when, you did everything possible. I just began to, and I could see, something was wrong,
So
you know.
you became a lot more sensitive to. So basically, every time that I was high or I had an issue, you would be able to sense it
I
in
could
some way.
sense it because you would just become very mean.
So no matter, really? So no matter how hard I
Yes.
would try to hide it, you'd basically be able to tell
I
still.
could tell because your behavior would instantly change. You'll become mean.
My demeanor would change.
Your demeanor will change. You become mean. You will not talk, much. But, there were things that, I just look at and I ask myself, yeah, there were things, that I could tell at that time. And first of all, I could perceive it and I will have all this, revelations and all of that.
How did it make you feel as my mom?
First of all, I was really, really disappointed. I was really sad. I just couldn't understand why you made a choice to go down that way. I just couldn't understand a lot of things because, when we came in, I knew it was really hard, on you people, your kids, coming out of, what you know to a place where you don't know. And it was also hard for me. And so I put all of that, together in my mind and my thoughts and all of that. But, something happened. It became a driving force for me not to give up. I learned early, thank God, in Nigeria, that God does really answer prayers. He's a prayer answering God. And so I'd seen God in action, I'd seen miracles. And so this drove me to my knees to begin to contend and say, Lord, but you spoke so much about Wilson. Lord, arrest him. Lord, do something. Lord. send away the friends. First of all, I began to pray that God will send away those friends, and those friends will not like you, and you will not like those friends. Because I remember talking with one of them, and I asked him, he was in the community college at that time. And I asked him, why was he in school? And he couldn't tell me why he was in school. For me, that was scary
Mm.
coming from my culture
Yeah.
because,
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah.
yeah, that was scary. That's like, what, we would say, this person has no future ambition. Coming from my culture is like, you know what you want to do before you get into college.
Right,
And
right.
so for somebody that was in college, say that he doesn't know what he wants to do, where he wants to end up, that was so bizarre. That was so like, wow, I was shocked. It was a total culture shock for me. And so I didn't know that kids could be in college and not know ultimately why they were in school. And I was like, that was a bad sign for me. I was like,
Where you say that, like, it's funny because this generation coming up, it's actually quite normal. They just go to school, they don't even
wow,
know what they want to do.
man, I don't know about that.
But
But
I
for
think it's so
me,
interesting that like that raised a flag for you. Because me
yeah.
now, the person I am today, sitting here, I'm like, yeah, actually, like I actually don't even like with every friend I have, there is almost like a plan, almost sort of now, and like everybody that I spend time with, there's almost a plan because there's so many people to reach out to. Mom, like every day, like it gets so busy. There's tons of people that I can be talking to. Every time I get in the car, there's phone calls I can make. So the idea that I had a friend who was in school and didn't even know like
What they
what they
wanted
wanted to
to
do.
do, I was shocked. And this person, had been in the community college for like a year plus. I was like, so what is he doing? Because,
Right.
yeah, why does he go to school?
Right. Wow. That's interesting because
So,
I knew that like the kind of family we came from, and you're right. Like, I was drastically influenced. Let me tell you about the first time I smoked weed ever. So this was at Cactus Shadows, and I was riding in a car with a couple of friends, and I really, really wanted to be cool at that time in my life. Like I really wanted to blend in because we were so different. Moving, like the pressure to blend in was just heavy. It was just there. And I was willing to do almost anything to like blend in. Like at that point, like I remember being told, like, okay, like, I even lied to them. I was like, yeah, I've done this before. It's not my first time. And I remember like knowing immediately that, oh boy, this is not good.
mm, mm,
Like I even messaged like my friend at the time. Like, and I messaged her and I was like, okay, like I'm here with these people, and like if anything goes wrong, just know that this is where I am and this is who I was with last. Like, because I thought I was going to die. It was very like it is a absolute it's like drugs being introduced to the brain. And I know you've never ever used drugs before, ever. Right. So like that being introduced to the brain it's a very foreign thing. And it's very confusing to the brain because it's such a large amount of like whatever it is that's like you just getting flushed in your brain, whether dopamine or whatever. The first time, it's just always weird. And then it happened again, and then it happened again, and then it happened again. And I think it was probably around after high school that I realized that, okay, this is a problem because now I am now using like, and why am I trying to? And then now it's affecting school for me because coming out of high school was easy for me. I could have been better, but I coasted my way through high school. I knew I never failed a class. I never had to repeat a class in high school. I never had to do any of that stuff. But it became a problem in college because all of a sudden now, like I was so dependent on it that like my priorities were shifting, right? And I would try to stop and I couldn't stop, and I could see that like it was causing you a lot of pain. And I could see that it was causing you a lot of like, but I was trying really hard to stop, but I just could not stop. And that was when it hit me that I
that
have a problem.
I do remember that, and this is to parents, especially. believers in Christ Jesus. I do remember I had prayed and so much, and I was believing God and holding on to the promises that the Lord had given me as touching you. I remember when you were 7, my pastor in Nigeria, his name is Chidiebere Wachuku.
Shout out, Pastor, my mentor
Yeah.
as well.
And you can see my smile now just became bigger
Yeah.
because, he was my pastor. He was also a friend. He was my father in the Lord. And with him came a lot of wisdom. God used him to address issues in my life and in my family and still continues to. And so I had turned, to him, even though he was in Nigeria, he visited a couple of times and he will encourage me and he will remind me of the promises of God as touching the life of Wilson. And so one day, I do remember I was driving, and from time to time, I will get prompts, to just call my children and pray immediately.
Mhm.
And it's very important that as parents, we are sensitive to this. So, because one of those days also, he had done something, I can't remember what it was. And I was really sad. I was unhappy. And he was in school in Georgia. And so, but a day later, I received a prompt while driving to call him and pray and speak the word of God into his life. And I just obeyed. And so I called him and I prayed. And I prayed for him, for a while. And then I was speaking into his life. But something unusual happened. I went back home and I fell asleep and I had a revelation. I saw a situation where I was contending with a particular servant of God in that revelation and saying, you need to pray and anoint Wilson. Initially, he acted like he was not hearing me, like, kind of ignoring me. And I said to myself in that revelation, you don't know me. I'm not going to go away. And you're going to do exactly. I'm not going to go away. I will not leave this place today. You got to pray. You got to anoint him. Whatever it was that was my request, I was not going away. And so I stood there and the revelation just changed. The next thing was I saw that I had like oil in my hand, a bottle of olive oil, and I was still praying over Wilson, but it was just a quick, like a transformation. The servant of God now walked, up to me, and when I looked behind Wilson, I saw he had knelt down. I saw multitude upon multitude of youths, so many, as far as my eyes could see. And they were all kneeling behind him. And we were now just, praying over them, anointing them. And I woke up. I knew instantly that was his future. These revelations, they were so timely. You see, God has the times and the seasons in his hand. And in his own time, he makes all things beautiful. If you're praying for your child that has this kind of issues, don't give up. The same God that answered my prayers, he has heard you, he will answer, but in his own time.
So when I went to school in Georgia, this was after like my community college escapades. Like that was probably some of the darkest moments of my whole life.
That's right.
Some of the darkest moments of my whole life. Like it was just so. It was a good time with friends and all. People were cool, friends and all. Like but it was very difficult. It was extremely hard. I was very alone. I thought going away to school would be like a great decision. Like I'd be away because I really wanted to get away from. I thought you were used to bother my whole life.
That's
I mean,
right.
you used to be like, oh my god,
And I'm still in
all
your
the
business.
time, oh in my ear. Like, I mean, I don't like. I think you just didn't know how to deal with the situation that was
Yeah.
presented. Like, I think it was a very difficult situation, and honestly, I don't even know how to deal with it now. Like, I mean, I'm a CEO of a company that helps people achieve a lifetime of sobriety. Like our behavioral homes and our clinics. Like, I sometimes don't even know what to do. Like, and I've been through it. Like, and I've seen, the miracle happen for me and other people. And I've read about it and I have professionals to advise me through it. And it's just sometimes it's just so I can't imagine how hard it would have been for you. At that time, man, like it was a lot of introspection. I probably failed. I lived in Georgia for I think 4 years, 3, 4 years.
Mhm.
I probably failed in that time span 80% of all my classes.
That's right.
I probably failed 80% of all of them.
And I
And
knew.
oh, you did?
Yep.
Yeah, I
I had
probably
a
did.
revelation.
Like I probably
The
failed
Lord reported you.
like 80% of all of them at that time. And I was like, man, like, mom, like it was hard. I couldn't stop. Like imagine like how you're driving a car and you
Mhm.
slam on the brakes
Yeah.
and the car basically doesn't stop immediately.
Mhm.
That was how I felt. I was trying to slam on the brakes, but my brakes weren't working. That's what drugs do actually. It
Mm.
takes over the person. It's like I always say, so there's a commercial of when like a guy smoking a cigarette and then he puts it out and then he goes in and sits down and then you see another cigarette, open the cigarette pack, walk out of the pack, put itself in its hand, put itself in his mouth,
Mm.
like right, then smacks him to go grab a lighter, and then it moves his hand to grab a lighter,
Mm.
drags him outside, lights the cigarette for him, and then forces him to inhale. And that's what addiction feels like.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult. And like one of the slogans we use for the company is recovery is a process that turns into a miracle.
Mm.
Because man, I don't know how anybody is getting out of it without a miracle.
I do remember why I brought up that last revelation I talked about, that it was your future, was because a couple of days later, you called me and you told me you were giving up the habits.
Yeah.
So I knew that day, that
Yeah.
night, a couple of days later. I mean, I've always prayed, but at that time, it pleased the Lord to respond to this. And the Bible says that
Yeah.
God allows us to go through things so that when we are comforted or when we're delivered, we can also comfort them that are going through that kind of situation. And coming, to the business now, I tell, the clients that it is possible to be free because I went through it with my son and I understand also, though, people respond, differently to things, but as a child of God, I know that Jesus is always in charge of all situations.
Yeah. I saw that firsthand because even at the same time that you're describing all the things you saw, when I told you I was trying to get out of it, like
Mm.
at that time I'd started like, getting into this regiment of like eating less. I didn't have money. It was a really hard period, mom, because I know you didn't have much either at that
Yeah.
time. And I know like there wasn't really like a lot of like resources, right? Like,
Mm.
and so I knew I couldn't reach out to you and say, hey, send me money all the time or send me money, like, right? Because I had made a choice and I knew I had to like figure it out myself. And I'd ruined the relationship that I had with you guys because there was like basically no more trust, right? Like,
That's right.
so like trust was broken
Mhm.
like in many, many ways, which we've skipped, man. Oh my gosh. so many stories of broken trust. Like I've done so many things which we'll be discussing through the season. I've invited a lot of people I think I broke trust with as well, and one particular one. And like I'd broken there was a lot of trust broken. And so I couldn't really come back and say, okay, hey, like I want this, because then it would be like, okay, no, you don't. You just want to use it to buy drugs. So like, no, man, like we're not going to give it to you anymore. And I remember riding the bus, and I often tell like, all the residents about like, baking your cake and eating your cake. Like you have to pay for what you've done. Right. Like, and I remember not having a car. I remember my car got repossessed. I remember having to ride the bus to wherever it is I wanted to go. I would have to like donate blood to get money. And this is the first time my mom is hearing all this stuff. So I'm sure she's really shocked. Like I would have to donate blood to get money. But at that time, I was being taught discipline. God had separated me and was teaching me discipline. The only places I would go most of the time there's this club called the Society of Entrepreneurs. Shout out SOE. I had a lot of friends there. And I would basically hang out with them, like learn about entrepreneurship, learn about like starting a business, listen to speakers. I would be engulfed in that. One of the biggest things, Georgia was so valuable because of SOE. I should have paid tuition to be a part of that club rather than paying tuition to like learn like in Terry School of Business. I should have paid tuition to be a part of that club because that club was so vital. My first few years of business, first 2 years, I used the things that I learned from SOE. Probably the first year at maximum, or minimum. The things I learned from SOE in Georgia, Mom, like I think back to those days and I go, man, like, so back, man, like when I was struggling and I was thinking to myself, man, Wilson, like this grind is not good. It's no bueno. Like you need to like to go home. This needs to be over. Like I stuck through it and I learned so much from SOE. Listening to people, they had speakers, people who had started businesses. One of the most remarkable ones was this guy who started a company called Solid Chicken Chick, something like that. I don't know. We can look up the name later or something like that. Like, right? Like, and it was, now his company's doing really, really well. But listening to these guys talk, all the things that they said really, really helped guide me like in business through my first year more than anything else. Mom, I say all that to say like, at the end of the day, I think when it's all said and done, like this journey that I went on, like where I am now, like God doesn't make mistakes.
No, he never does make mistakes. And there's a scripture that says all things work together for good for them that love the Lord. Trust the Lord and are also called according to his purpose. You see. So as a child of God, my anchor has always been Christ. And at that time, I never knew that it was a process. You talked about Georgia and how you couldn't, make it through 80% of your class. Yes, I had seen a situation where I saw you alight from the bus and
You saw me say that again?
alight, come down from the bus.
Okay. Get off the bus.
Yeah. But you had nothing. Your shirt was wrinkled. And
yeah.
I remember, did I tell you that?
Yeah, you did. That's exactly basically what happened.
Yeah.
More in the fashion that like, I remember finally making the decision to come home.
Yeah.
Me and a couple of buddies, which one of those buddies from that house I'll be interviewing in this podcast, we had gotten evicted. Our house address number was like 1738. Well, not all of us. One of our buddies there, like he kind of figured it out somehow. We didn't pay rent. There was like, I think 2 or 3 of us that didn't pay rent. And so we were then getting evicted from the house. And I remember Mom, like, okay, so that house, right? 1738. I would sit out in front. Some people would go to class. Some of them worked. So some people would go to work and figure it out. And I would be the one that would just be doing nothing. Like, I would just be doing nothing. All I did was I would just sit out and just smoke. That's all I did. And I remember one day, and the whole time, right deep down, I was tired of it. I was just tired. I knew something needed to give. I didn't know when, but I knew something needed to give. And so I would literally sit out in front of that house and I would smoke and pray. It was the weirdest, worst thing ever, right? Because I was like, man, like this pipe is like forcing itself in my hand, or at least it's what it felt like, right? Like it was forcing itself in my hand, and it is basically like forcing me to use it. And I was like, man, like I need to beat this. And one time I distinctly just like heard like a voice that just told me, you'll get out of this, and you have no idea like what I'm going to give you. Like I looked, because where I lived, like there was one building, and then to the right, like there's a whole like vast forest, right? Like, and upstairs there's an upper deck where we used to like be able to walk out through somebody's window and go up to the roof. And I remember being told to like just look out, like basically like you are going to have a great life. Don't worry, don't worry. Just keep trying. Shortly after that, we get evicted. And then I'm selling all our properties because at this point, I know it. And my dad had died at this point because I went back to school. We had lost, went back to school. I'd lost my dad. And so I went back to school, like, and basically, like, it was just so hard for me personally, because at that time, my relationship with him had started to get better. My relationship with my dad was like starting to pick up and build. And I was just like, man, I got to figure something out. I really, really have to figure something out for myself, because this is not where I'm supposed to be. This is not where I want to be. Like, like I remember mom asking you at some point, like to borrow money. And you were like, I don't have money. Like, I was like, Mom, come on. All I want is just like $20. I don't know if you remember that.
Mhm.
And like, you basically had like negative money in your account.
That's right.
And at that point, that was when I knew that, like, okay, yeah, dude, that was when it did me. Like, yeah, I can never do drugs again. I need to figure out my life. I need to get up. I need to go. I need to figure things out. Like, I need to make change. Looking at you, it's so funny how it came full circle, because I know you were the number one, like, cheerleader, the number one supporter of my success, right? Of wanting me to be successful, wanting me to not be an addict anymore, being at the forefront of the fight, being there for me, right? Whenever I needed you. It's funny because it was looking at you that I realized, like, yeah, no. Like Pastor Chidi, like, was always just there.
Mhm.
One of the things he told me that I tell all my residents now, especially the ones, there's some of them that come by or come through, that like I can see that, like, oh yeah, this one, I think this one is one that's gonna figure it out for sure. And he told me one time, like, he was like, you know what, man, like, all these people say all these things about you, right? But he says, God hasn't given up on you, and I will never give up on you either. And that really like opened up my mind. It opened up my brain. And I was like, oh wow, like, huh. So despite all these things that I've done, this
Mhm.
guy's over here telling me that, like, I'm not, like, he doesn't think I'm that bad, but I'm worth not giving up on.
Mhm.
Man, I don't think this podcast, like this 1 hour time frame, is enough for us to really, really, really explore even further and deeper, because there's so much more that has happened ever since then. In your own words, Mom. So ever since I came back, I got like evicted from my house in Georgia, and then I came home, like sold all my stuff. I called my friend Katie, and she hopped in our car and came down, and we both drove back to Arizona. And so basically, right, like ever since then, what's happened? What have you seen change wise, right? Like
A
what?
lot, a lot has gone on. I learned also because the Lord was also teaching me. It was, like I said, a process, and that He's always in charge. Nothing takes Him unawares. He's the master of situations
Hmm.
and circumstances. And so I believed because, like I said, certain times He gave me certain revelations that kept me, I will hold on to and I will go, before him and all of that. And so you came back. I remember, also your aunt Lee telling me some stuff, and we encouraged you to go back to ASU, to go back to school. You did. I
Yeah,
could
and I got
see.
straight A's
Yes,
through
you
before
did.
graduation.
Yeah, because I knew you were smart. The hands of God is upon your life. And this is what I even tell people now going back to school. The Lord has seen the exams before. He knows the questions and He's sitting inside of you. And so, I encouraged you and I kept on telling you, you got to build. But I remember the first day I came to ASU to see you, and I looked at your little place and I was so sad and I was literally in tears. But I said, at certain times, the Lord had given certain revelations. And one of them was about this, the outpatient. It was about, also, being health.
I think what I really want to know, Mom, is
Yeah.
like, tell me the process, or in your eyes, the process of how things went from like our relationship being broken, the trust that wasn't there anymore,
Yeah.
to the trust, because I think the trust is fully rebuilt,
Yes.
especially when it comes to those kind of things.
Yes.
Right? I think we have full trust now, but how has that been? How was that for you?
Okay.
At what point did you
So,
realize that, like, okay, this guy has truly changed?
yeah, when I realized that things were beginning to shift in your life, I saw a lot of changes. I also, noticed that you were beginning to listen. You were being trying to be responsible. All of that. Your decision to go back to school was one, and focusing. You see, because when you have a problem with addiction, there are the ones they call, the functioning addicts and all of that. It's very difficult to focus and do things and all of that without sleeping. I was watching all of those. And like I said, that I used to be able to smell. I don't know if that was physical or, it was something I just sensed. So, but that was gone. It was just gone. And so as I looked and, was praying and all of that, but however, the biggest was that revelation I had. That was like a turning point. Because you see, I know that the Lord doesn't lie. When
And
He says something that I have intervened in something, it's done.
yeah, and that speaks to like your belief. I think that speaks to your belief. I think that speaks to even my belief personally, right? Like, but still, right? You need only a mustard seed worth of faith for
That's
things to
right.
manifest.
That's
But
right.
still, like, at what point did you now start trusting me?
I began to trust you, like I said. First of all, when I had that revelation, the trust was already there.
Really?
Yes, but I never told you.
Wow.
Yeah, it was already there because I knew that the Lord had gone ahead. The encounters I've had, if He says it's done, it's done. That's it. It's done. If He says something is wide, it's wide.
Wow.
For a while, you could see it as maybe it's looking like it's dark, but it's actually white.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's done, it's done.
yeah.
And so I knew that it was done. He
Okay.
was telling me, in this situation, I have taken care of it. And so that also, and a mother's love, it never goes away. It's unconditional. Yes, there was broken trust, but like I told you, that when trust is broken, it takes a while to build. But yeah, so if the Lord is saying this is wide, it is
That's
wide.
why. So,
So
okay.
I knew that I had to tell you that I trust you to give you confidence.
Right.
And so I knew this and I had to encourage you.
So, okay. So then I come home and then you saw that I was trying to be responsible.
Yes.
You saw, I mean, obviously you could tell that I'd stopped using.
Yes.
So that was also pretty clear.
Yes.
Okay. So remember the big pitch competition?
Yes.
And so you came for that. And then that was like, what was that like for you? Was that like a moment for you or anything like
It
that?
was a moment for me. because the Lord speaks, and the Bible says He tells those things that be not as though they are, and it is so.
Mm,
And so I'd always known, from remember I said, the prophetic words that's touching your
right.
life and all of that. God had a blueprint for your life. And I do remember telling you a couple of days ago that one of the challenges that I had was I saw greatness, but I didn't know how you couldn't see it. And it was a challenge because the Lord is saying, you see, there's greatness in this person. And all the time, that I was trying to get you, to see, there's greatness in you. There's greatness, there's a deposit in you. You will be great and all of that. I just couldn't understand how you couldn't see it. And so it was challenging.
It's not that I couldn't. I could, but it's challenging, like you say. It was
Yeah,
very I could see it, but I also just like you didn't know how it would happen. And I think
yeah.
that's why I'm so good with the residents because I understand like that they can see it also. They know that there's something about them, right? Like, and when I say residents, I mean, like the people we work with to help achieve a lifetime of sobriety, they can see it, right? But like, I don't know, there's something about it, mom. It's a bit tough. It's a bit like, and anybody who's never experienced it before, it's hard for them to understand. But at the same time, I think the people who are on the other end of the experience that like receive it also, like I
Mhm.
think like it must be like extremely excruciating for you as well.
So that you were talking about the pitch.
Yeah,
And so, it was like, okay. And I remember coming to that page and all of that. And, the Lord had spoken about favor.
so the big pitch,
That was, it was a moment of triumph. I just say it like that.
really,
And yeah, I could see, like the big picture. I could see things beginning to fall into place.
really.
Yeah, I saw it at a time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually started with me. Like for the first time ever, I wrote down some goals, some things. And again, shout out my mentor, Pastor Chidi. Like he said some things to me and I was writing them down. And I still have that napkin till today.
Yeah.
It's probably about 5-year-old napkin, man. Like I wrote down a lot of things on there. That year, I wrote down my goals and I remember like working hard through the big pitch and then eventually like getting that. Like I'm really glad it made you proud because I
Yeah,
was
you did.
at that point I was really, really trying to improve myself. The big pitch was a competition where there was about $20,000 worth of like prize money to be won for entrepreneurs to like start their own businesses, etc. And I won that pitch and it was a really, really great opportunity. So in context, from where I used to be and where I am now, overall, right? Because I mean, the big pitch was great, but
Mhm.
I'm very far ahead of the big pitch at this point,
That's right.
right? Like the things I saw possible when I did that and the things that I do now are two completely different things.
I see you've grown so much. You've grown so much to the extent where I can relax a little.
A little, only a
Yes.
little.
Yeah. Even though, as an intercessor, that is okay, a story for another day.
Okay.
So, because, yeah, I can spend so much time, you never rest. You never stop praying.
Yeah.
You never stop interceding for your
Yeah.
children and declaring the word of God over their lives. That is a big part of it.
Right. Right.
Going to the Lord
Right.
every day, every second,
Yeah.
every minute.
And I feel like that's been a big job for you.
Yes, it has been a big job for me. And
And
I
you do it well.
also, to God be the
You do it
glory.
very well.
To God be the glory, the Holy Spirit, at work. And also my mom. I see my mom. My mother prays for her children every day. She calls everybody's name and she prays over her children. I also learned from that. And so, You've grown so much. And so if I talk about this podcast without mentioning her, I will not,
Yeah, no, grandma is great.
yeah,
Grandma is that's
yeah,
another. I think maybe I have to have her on at some point.
yeah.
Grandma is just
So
phenomenal.
because she prayed so much and cried out to God so much as touching you. And so, looking at where you are now, you're still on a journey.
Oh, we are just scratching the surface of what we're
Yes.
going to do. We're just getting
Yes.
started.
And God is taking you somewhere.
We're just
You
getting
know,
started.
when you were little, one of the revelations you had, I'm going to tell you about it because I've never spoken to you
A lot of the things
about
I'm
it.
hearing here, I've never heard before.
Yes. And so this, I just like a flashback of that. I just got it now. And so, I know that there's still, a journey ahead, but God's hand is upon your life. And I know that God is taking you to a destination.
Mm.
The path is clear before you. And there is a book, according to Psalm 139, I believe 16, as
Right.
touching your life. And so God is aligning you with that. And so you've grown so much. You've grown so much, and I'm so proud of you. And some of the deposits in your life, some of those personality that you had as a child, they did not all go away, but the Lord has also used them as a strength. They also a strength now that you coming into maturity. I can look back and I say, okay, because you had this nature, you wanted to explore things. And it's a drive, in the positive direction now.
Absolutely.
It's a drive. It keeps you. I see you. I watch you. It drives you. It drives perfection. It drives you. It's taking you somewhere.
When you say you watch me, what do you see?
And so I see it. I see a drive.
How is that? Okay, so growing up, I used to get into things.
Yes.
Don't touch the TV. I want to push the TV.
Yes.
How have you seen that change now?
Trying to explore
to become-
things, but as a child, you wanted to know how that television works.
Right, right.
You wanted to see what was it about that television,
Yeah.
but now you see the positive. You're more matured. For example, there's a situation, there's the drive to solve this situation and to do it in the right way.
So you see, how do you see that? Because it's not like I work in front of you. I mean, I work at
Yes.
home sometimes, but
You're
I usually shut my
matured.
door. How do you see all that?
I see it. I see it. I see you working. Remember, I walk past your office. I see you. I hear you on the phone when you're talking. I hear you. I see it.
Oh, I think I might need to soundproof my office door.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
So, well,
I'm just
I
kidding.
told you I'm going to be in your business.
Yeah, clearly, you have been. Yes, you have.
Yeah, I'm always in your business.
Mhm.
And so, even the ones you don't tell me, guess who's going to be telling me? The Lord.
Yeah, I think me and him are going to start keeping a few secrets
No
from you.
way, he doesn't.
Mom, thank you so much for coming on today. Wow, this has been a great conversation. Man, getting to learn so many of these things from
Glad
you. I
to be
appreciate it. I
here.
think we'll probably do this again. Maybe,
Okay.
yeah, maybe on another season. We'll invite you
Yeah.
again.
Can I say one last
Sure,
thing?
absolutely.
This is, to all your parents out there that are praying and believing, God, for your child, your children, peradventure they're not acting right and all of that. Don't give up. God does answer prayers. God does transform. God will bring them home. Keep praying and declaring the word of God over their lives. And even when they stumble, show them love. Don't give up. Keep praying. God will do great things with them.
I agree. Keep praying. Keep praying. He'll do great things. My mom is really awesome and phenomenal, but the ways I've been able to apologize to my mom for my behavior, man, like keep praying because I think anything is possible. Recovery is a process that turns into a miracle. Love you, Mom. Thank you.
Love you too.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Sober Social Club podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review and feel free to share it with somebody you think might benefit from this. Don't forget to tune in next week for another inspiring episode. Until then, remember, tough times don't last. Tough men do. Stay strong and keep living your best life.